Is 9mm viable as a deer hunting cartridge out of a carbine? I have had this notion for a while that the 9mm pistol cartridge is viable as a deer hunting round out of a carbine out to about 100 yards. Now, I'm going to get into the ballistics of this, and we're going to talk about why it may or may not be a good idea of mine. I've had a notion for a while that the 9mm pistol cartridge could be a viable deer hunting round out of a carbine up to about 100 yards. Now, I'd like to get into the ballistics of it, and we'll discuss that and see if you might or might not agree with me at the end of this video. Let's get started. Now, I own both a 9mm carbine and two 9mm pistols right now. The standard pistol that I fire is the Remington R51. That's a 3.5-inch barrel, basic little old single stack 9mm skinny pistol. And that's my first 9mm, that's what most of my experience is with. I bought a 9mm carbine right here, the Bear Creek BCA 9mm AR. Fitted with just a basic little vortex scope on there. And I am fairly convinced this is a viable deer hunting setup up to 100 yards without much trouble. Besides the fact that it's a nice little platform, the 9mm bullet does put it into question. So let's talk about the ballistics of it first. The 9mm generally shoots 115 and 124 grain bullets. There's some heavier ones. You can get in some of the custom 135-ish, 145, 147 grain heavy stuff. I don't really want to go there too much, but we're going to start talking about this here. Personally, I wouldn't have a problem shooting a deer with this pistol at point blank range, and I would imagine that should work well with a decent hunting round at, say 5 yards away. Now let's look again at these numbers with the carbine versus the pistol. That's my carbine versus my pistol. 115 grains in the carbine. We have going 1325. We have the 124s going about 1250. 147 is going about 1,000. That's the rough average for all the standard velocity target loads I could find. In the pistol, we got 1075, 1,000, and about 950 feet per second out of my Remington R51. Come on, get out! What are you doing back there? Come on! Get out, get out! Hey, if you don't want your hens in here, Mr. Rooster, then keep them out. Shoo! Where was I? Let's take a closer look quick at the gains in velocity between the carbine and the pistol. So with the 115 grain load, we see a velocity gain of about 250 feet per second. With the 124 grain load, we see again about a velocity gain of roughly 250 feet per second, based on my averages. And down here we see a velocity gain of only about 50 feet per second. You're going to notice that anytime you're working with heavier bullets, it's harder to gain more with a longer barrel using the heaviest bullets. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but what does it show us? Not a whole lot, because this is just muzzle velocity. Let's look at the trajectory between 0 and 100 yards. And let's look at the comparison of an actual hunting load, something potent. Let's talk about one of my favorites, the Buffalo Bore 124 grain plus P round. This is not the highest power round you're going to get. It's a pretty potent one though. We're going to look at both velocity and bullet energy, our feet per second velocity and our foot-pounds of bullet energy here, starting 0 yards and then looking at 100 again. At 100 yards, let's see if it sounds powerful enough to take out a deer. My BC9 with a velocity and an energy, velocity. The BC9 has on average 1,651 feet per second velocity at the muzzle with these rounds. That's 750 foot-pounds of energy. Going down to my pistol here, at the muzzle with the hot loads, it's going to have about 1,215 foot-pounds of energy. And that is 339 foot-pounds of energy. Now this is rather potent here and rather interesting numbers, but let's look over to 100 yards now. So the BC9 at 100 yards, my carbine, is shooting those buffalo bore plus P rounds, 124 grain, at approximately on average 1,335 feet per second. That's 491 foot-pounds of energy at 100 yards with a 36 caliber 124 grain bullet that will penetrate well. My pistol R51, just for comparison's sake, because I think this is interesting, is shooting my 9mm bullet at 1,033 feet per second on average, as an approximate average, with about 249 foot-pounds of energy. So the difference at 100 yards between these rounds with potent ammo is over 300 feet per second. We got about 250 feet per second on average at muzzle velocity with our standard velocity rounds. But when we're looking at these high velocity rounds, we see at 100 yards there's still a heck of a difference. And look at that power. So looking at those numbers, if we're talking almost 500 foot-pounds of energy, okay, that's potent range. I know hunting loads from the 357 Magnum that only have about 500 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. This is about 500 foot-pounds of energy at 100 yards. That puts this rifle with the Buffalo Bore 124 grain plus P round at shooting faster than your average hunting round, or equal to about your average hunting round for the 357 Magnum pistol. Now there are hotter loads for the 357 that you can go for, sure. My point is, I know guys who hunt regularly at up to 100 yards with the 357 revolvers shooting around 500 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle loads. So this is effectively a minimum, the same effective range, the same power range as the 357 revolver. Now, when we consider the maneuverability of a carbine, its handleability, I can hold this a lot steadier than anybody's going to hold a revolver. I've got a scope on this. If you put a scope on a revolver, they're hard to handle. It's hard to see through the scope. You've got to have some kind of rest. With this, I can function just swell like that. There's very little recoil. Oh, you talk about no recoil. If you did need a follow-up shot, if you want to watch where your animal is going after your shot, I don't lose sight of my target. Shucks, I was target shooting at, my range goes out to a maximum of 378 yards. I was shooting the gongs out there. You don't lose sight of your target with this thing. There's not enough muzzle rise when you're firing, not enough recoil, not enough shock, not enough muzzle flash or concussion to make you lose your sight picture at all, even through a scope like this when I'm shooting. So if you want to watch your animal, you make a shot, you can see where your animal goes. No problem. Okay, how about this? Maybe you're still not convinced. Sure. Maybe it's not the best deer cartridge. But what about for kids, a youth hunter? I'm not going to put my kids behind a 30-06 or a 308. My oldest daughter is going to be turning 8 soon. She's almost old enough to dabble into a little deer hunting. Guess what? She can shoot this. And at 100 yards, I can't see why this isn't going to take out a deer with any shot into the vital zone with a good bullet. It's poking a 36 caliber hole even if it doesn't expand. If it does expand, it's poking about a ½ hole. That's pretty good. 1,335 feet per second is definitely fast enough to blow a hole through a deer. That's old school muzzleloader territory, and those bullets work great. Also consider the fact that because it's lower recoil, very low concussion too. It's actually slightly more recoil than I get out of my 223 ARs. But the concussion, the muzzle blast, is so less and it's so much quieter, you actually can stay calmer better while shooting it. It helps your nerves to stay calm so you can develop better shooting habits. Somebody who's a little recoil sensitive or somebody who's got a bad back like me when shooting, I can't handle that recoil well. It causes me to flinch because it hurts. Something like this, I can sit here all day long and fire, and I can get so comfortable and so used to this rifle and that trigger and know when the trigger's going to break. I make better shots with this than I did with my Ruger American 308 because of the less recoil. I just shoot it better. If you shoot it better, oh, that's a little better hunting option, in my opinion. My final... Well, how accurate is it? How accurate do you need to be? Okay, here is This hole at the top, by the way, is a staple hole from where I pulled the target out. This is a group of mine that I shot. This is 100 yards. Let's see, I have notes here. 100 yards fast fire. That means it was 16 seconds. I am going to show you the secret though. I am covering up a bad shot with my fingers here. See that? Take a look. Now, I want to point this out. So, 9 shots. There's 8 right here, and then 1 here within 16 seconds. Sure, that's a good average, but I was shooting on a gusty day. It was pretty gusty and wind gusty. At 100 yards, just with standard 115 grade regular standard velocity ammo, you can get 4 inches of wind drift with a moderate wind gust. 10 to say maybe 20 mile an hour gust, windy enough, you can get that much wind drift. Now, that still would have been well in the vitals of my deer. I mean, the vitals are roughly about the size of this paper turned sideways on a white-tailed deer. Still well within the vitals, but something to keep in mind, not a good wind bucking rifle. It's just, it is a fat, slower cartridge compared to a deer hunting rifle. But these things obviously shoot fast. I mean, I bought the cheapest AR-9 you can get. It's one of the second cheapest 9mm carbine on the market. And it shoots about 1.5 MOA at 100 yards on any given day. Not bad. So my last question then is just how much energy do you need a bullet to have in order to consider it good for deer hunting? How much energy do you want it to have remaining to make the shot? I've heard 1,300, 1,200 foot-pounds, 1,000. I've heard 750 foot-pounds. I tend to go around, roughly 500 foot-pounds is very much enough for reliable penetration, especially if you're using a bullet that's not going to expand too quickly. So with the 9mm, I mean, even your standard defensive loads, they don't expand too fast. They tend to work. And I have seen, just in my ballistics testings, they hold up well at the faster speeds of the carbine. I mean, these speeds at 100 yards, almost at 1,000. These speeds at 100 yards, 1,335 feet per second. That is the fastest speed you're going to get out of any 9mm pistol with any potent load. I mean, you're not going to get that fast with any of the heavier loads. My Glock 20, Glock 10mm, doesn't shoot full power 10mm hunting loads that fast at the muzzle. It's more like 1250 at the muzzle, actual velocity as measured by my chronograph. And this is a hunting pistol. So if this is good for hunting at, say, 35 to 40 yards, no problem, with a bullet going about, 1,200 feet per second, this bullet going 1,335 feet per second, a little faster, ought to work at 100 yards, right? That's the way I see it. And guess what? I'm taking this gun deer hunting this year. It's going to be fun. Now, please tell me what you think about this info. What's your opinion? I want to get into some discussions here in the comments. I want to know what you think. It's not an amazing, perfect, good for everything cartridge, but at 100 yards, I don't see why I can't kill a 150-pound deer with that bullet. Also, little sneak peek, check out my upcoming videos. I've got a couple more pistol caliber carbine ARs that I'm playing with, and I'm going to be making some videos about those. You're probably going to be interested if you like anything about guns. So watch for some of those new videos. I'll catch you later. Bye now.